This does not look like one of Chevrolet's most interesting muscle cars. No racing stripes, no shaker hood, no cartoon graphics, no giant spoiler. It looks like something a successful accountant would drive to dinner. But in 1970, Chevrolet quietly offered this long hood, luxury coupe with a 454 cubic inch big block V8, heavy-duty suspension, dual exhaust, rally wheels, and just enough badging to let you know something was hiding underneath. This was the Monte Carlo SS 454, and here is the strange part. Chevrolet built more than 159,000 Monte Carlos for 1970, but only 3,823 buyers ordered the SS 454. That makes it rarer than a lot of famous muscle cars people talk about all the time. So why did Chevy's luxury muscle car get overlooked? And why did it disappear so quickly? To understand the Monte Carlo SS 454, you have to forget what a Chevrolet performance car usually looked like in 1970. The loud cars were obvious. The Chevrolet SS had presence. The Camaro had attitude. The Corvette was a Corvette. Even the Nova could be optioned into something mean. But the Monte Carlo was different from the start. Chevrolet introduced it for the 1970 model year as its first real personal luxury coupe. That phrase matters. Personal luxury cars were not trying to be stripped-down drag racers. They were built around long hoods, formal rooflines, quiet cabins, soft trim, and the feeling that the driver had bought something a little more sophisticated than a normal midsize coupe. Pontiac had already found success with the Grand Prix. Ford had the Thunderbird. Buick, Oldsmobile, Mercury, and Chrysler all understood that buyers were starting to want style and comfort as much as raw speed. So Chevrolet needed its own entry, and the Monte Carlo was the answer. It had a huge hood, a clean grille, a graceful roofline, and a cabin that felt more like a small luxury car than a bare-knuckle street machine. Chevrolet's own marketing leaned into that. The early brochures did not scream about burnouts or quarter-mile times. They showed the Monte Carlo sitting still, looking polished, quiet, and expensive. That was the point. This was supposed to be a gentleman's Chevrolet. But then Chevy did something unexpected. It gave the gentleman a 454. The SS 454 package did not turn the Monte Carlo into a cartoon. That is what made it so good. Instead of adding wild graphics or a giant hood scoop, Chevrolet kept the car fairly subtle. The big change was mechanical. For 1970, the SS 454 package included the LS5 454 cubic inch turbojet V8, rated at 360 horsepower. It came with a turbo Hydra-matic automatic transmission, a 3.31 rear axle, heavy-duty suspension pieces, additional frame-stiffening front and rear anti-roll bars, dual exhaust, rally wheels, and small SS 454 callouts near the rocker moldings. Chevrolet actually gave the Monte Carlo the hardware to handle the power. It was still a big personal luxury coupe. It was still comfortable. It was still quieter and more refined than a Chevrolet SS. But underneath, it had real muscle. That made it a strange car to classify. It was not as raw as a Chevrolet. It was not as sporty as a Camaro. It was not as glamorous as a Corvette. But if you wanted a long hood, a nice interior, and a giant Chevy big block, the Monte Carlo SS 400 made a surprising amount of sense. It was a muscle car for somebody who did not want everyone at the stoplight to know it immediately. And that may be exactly why so few people ordered it. The Monte Carlo SS 454 was caught between two audiences. Performance buyers already knew where to go. If you wanted a Chevy muscle car in 1970, the obvious choice was the Chevrolet SS 454. It had the reputation, the shape, the image, and, if ordered right, even more horsepower. The Chevelle looked like a muscle car. The Monte Carlo looked like something your uncle bought after a promotion. That image mattered. On the other side, the typical Monte Carlo buyer was not necessarily looking for maximum performance. They wanted style, comfort, a smooth ride, a long hood, maybe air conditioning, maybe vinyl roof elegance, maybe a small block V8 that could cruise all day without drama. To that buyer, the SS 454 package may have seemed unnecessary, expensive, or even a little out of character. And because the package was subtle, it did not shout value the way a striped, scooped, high-profile muscle car did. The result was a car that made perfect sense to a very specific person and almost nobody else. The Monte Carlo SS 454 was for the buyer who wanted Chevelle power without Chevelle noise, luxury without Cadillac money, muscle without advertising it. That is an incredible combination today. But in 1970, it put the car in a middle zone. And when cars land in the middle, buyers often miss them. The numbers make the story clear. For 1970, Chevrolet built more than 159,000 Monte Carlos. That was a strong debut. The Monte Carlo itself was not a failure, far from it. Chevy had read the market correctly. Buyers really did want personal luxury coupes, and the Monte Carlo gave them style, comfort, and Chevrolet pricing. But the SS 454 version was a different story. Only 3,823 were built for 1970. Then, in 1971, the number dropped again to just 1,919 SS 454 cars. After that, the SS 454 package was gone. That means the original big block Monte Carlo SS lasted just 2 model years. And that short life is part of why it is so interesting now. The Monte Carlo name would go on for decades. In the 1980s, the SS badge would come back in a totally different way, tied to NASCAR-style aerodynamics and small block performance. But the early Monte Carlo SS 404 was its own thing. It belonged to a tiny window when Chevrolet could still offer a personal luxury coupe with a huge big block V8 before the industry changed direction. By the early 1970s, insurance pressure, emissions rules, lower compression ratios, fuel concerns, and changing buyer habits were already starting to reshape the American performance car. The Monte Carlo SS 454 arrived right at the edge. That is why it feels like a car from 2 eras at once. It had the comfort-focused future of the 1970s, but it still carried the big block heart of the muscle car peak. The easiest way to understand the Monte Carlo SS 454 is to compare it to the Chevelle SS 454. The Chevelle told you what it was. The Monte Carlo made you ask. That difference changed everything. On a Chevelle, the SS identity was part of the attitude. It was the thing people recognized. It was the thing people wanted. On a Monte Carlo, the SS 454 package was almost hidden in the car's larger personality. The long hood and formal roofline did not scream street racer. The interior did not feel stripped or aggressive. The car's mission was not to make teenagers stare from the sidewalk. It was supposed to feel expensive, smooth, and composed. That makes the SS 454 version more interesting now than it may have been when new, because today, subtle muscle has a different appeal. A car that hides power feels clever. A big block engine in a luxury coupe feels unusual. And a production number under 4,000 gives it the kind of rarity that collectors pay attention to. The Monte Carlo SS 454 was not ignored, because it was bad. It was ignored because it did not fit the simple story people expected. And sometimes those are the cars that age the best. There is a phrase that fits this car better than almost anything else. Gentleman muscle. Not because it was weak, not because it was slow, but because it carried its power differently. The Monte Carlo SS 454 did not need stripes across the hood to make its point. It had a 454 under a hood long enough to look like its own zip code. It had enough suspension upgrades to separate it from a normal cruiser. It had enough torque to make the car feel effortless. And it had just enough SS 454 badging for the person next to you to realize, maybe too late, that this was not a regular Monte Carlo. That is the charm. It was not built for the loudest buyer in the room. It was built for the buyer who knew exactly what box to check, and only 3,823 people checked it in 1970. Today, the Monte Carlo SS 454 sits in a fascinating spot. It is not as famous as the Chevrolet SS 454. It is not as iconic as a Hemi Cuda. It is not as visually aggressive as a Boss Mustang or a Z28 Camaro, but that is exactly why it deserves more attention. It shows that the muscle car era was not just about the obvious heroes. There were quieter experiments happening too. Cars that blended luxury and power. Cars that gave buyers a different kind of performance image. Cars that were rare not because they were impossible to order, but because almost nobody understood them when they were sitting on the showroom floor. The Monte Carlo SS 454 was one of those cars. Chevrolet built a personal luxury coupe for the new decade. Then it gave that coupe a giant big block V8, and instead of becoming a legend overnight, it slipped into the background. That might be the most Monte Carlo thing about it. It was never trying to scream. It was just quietly serious. So was the 1970 Monte Carlo SS 454. A forgotten muscle car? Not exactly. It was something stranger. It was Chevrolet's luxury coupe with a muscle car heart. A car that shared the showroom with louder legends, but offered a completely different kind of performance personality. It was rare because it sat between two worlds. Too refined for some muscle car buyers, too serious for some luxury coupe buyers, and too subtle to become famous right away. But today, that is exactly what makes it special. The Monte Carlo SS 454 was not the muscle car everyone expected from Chevrolet. It was the one hiding in plain sight. If you had to choose, would you take a Chevrolet SS 454 or the rarer Monte Carlo SS 454? Let me know in the comments.